Well, they're finally here, and I bought mine straight off of A-Main Hobbies. Check this out, guys. I know you've all been wondering and making huge guesses in my Project Overkill 2020 which axles I was going to run, and you'll see here, back order, out of stock. You know why? Because I have mine already here, that's right. But I want to say, let's have a look at this. I'm in Canada. For the front axle, all the parts to assemble it, everything is $299 US. So that's 300 USD. That means in Canada for the F9 SCX-10-2 Currie portal axle from Vanquish, you are looking at $400 I paid for that front axle. Plus you're having to look at the back axle, which is not as complicated, thankfully. That is $200, so you're looking at about $280 plus shipping. And on top of that, I went with the axle mounted servo for the steering, which was about additional, there you go, $34.99 on the back, so about $55 plus shipping, altogether over $600. Now this is an insane investment into Project Overkill 2020. But the original Project Overkill was also something that evolved over time. Of course, this is my 1/8 scale GMC top kick body, just currently sitting on 4 RC 4-wheel drive tires. They're 2.2 size. Now they're mudslingers. I went over this in the last video discussing that there was no RC 4-wheel drive on the side walls of this to say they were RC 4-wheel drive mudslingers. And I thought they were clones. And so then I went and I looked at my other mudslingers I have on some of my scale trucks, and they also don't say RC 4-wheel drive on them. So that was very interesting because I had posted the question, would you actually pay the money for brand name products, or would you go for the less expensive knockoffs? And it was very interesting in the comments section in the last video what some of your answers were and what some of the results and the reasoning behind some of your results and answers. So thank you for participating in that. I would also like you to participate in today as well, because I'm pretty sure I paid top dollar for brand name Currie to be on these axles. Plus Vanquish says their products are bar none some of the best that are out there. I've also had success with the older Vanquish products that are out there, and I'm looking forward to assembling these, so I might as well start on, let's say, the front one first. Let's have a look at what's inside the bag. It's like Christmas morning every time I get to do a build with you guys. I get to discover new products. Hopefully you guys do as well. Although this product isn't new to market, it's new to the studio for me. And man, oh man, look at that. Let's see if I can get a little back into that Currie shot for you. I wonder how much they had to pay for licensing fees on that. It's a fairly light axle housing. You can hear the metal there. Very nice. Moving on. Spiral cut gears, spiral cut pinion. I like seeing that. Longevity is what that means for me. And more power. Leave that open just off to the side. Fast Eddy bearings. Welcome back, Fast Eddy. You're in a lot of my 5th scale stuff. Ah, interesting. Open race in the back there. I just thought there might have been some of you that didn't know what the race was. The race is that outer wall on a bearing. So you can see these ones are open. I wonder if I can put some grease in there manually, or if I even need to. Of course, this being a tough truck, it's going to see some water, so I think I'm going to do that. Here's one of the big bonuses. I love seeing this when companies take the time to actually lay out proper instructions on how to build things instead of having a download link. I'm sure they have that as well. It's probably on here at vanquishproducts.com possibly. But right there, I can put it together easy enough. That's one thing I notice about copy brands. Unless it already comes pre-assembled, you never really know how to put it together. So good to know. Okay, so laid out on the table so you can see the package contents of the front portal gear from Vanquish. You can see all the bearings from Fast Eddy down here on the bottom. Got some bushings, drive pins, lock nuts, screws, The gears for the portal assembly itself with the axles, the 12mm hex adapters. These are bearing holders up to the spindles. These are all very light. If you're wanting a lightweight truck, like these, you can barely tell they're in your hand. It's like feather light stuff, which is good if you're looking to keep your weight down low, or weight ratio low, I should say. And also here is your 30-tooth spool and your 8-tooth pinion. I like the helical gears. Spiral cut gears are the best, of course, in my opinion, for trail trucks, that's for sure. So let's get into step one. 6 screws into the spool gear. Now, I believe the open race bearings are the ones that go on either side of the spool. And once it's packed, then I introduce the bearing housing, just like this, on either side. Now, don't get me wrong, although these axles were very expensive, they are sold out everywhere. Like when I was looking online, these black front ones are incredibly challenging to find right now. They must be very, very popular among the scale trail guys right now, because they are in limited supply, I will tell you what. So there we go. According to the instructions, I believe that is correct. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, where this is going to mount up, and as you can see, it kind of marries itself together as one unit right there. So a pretty brilliant design, actually. I love what I'm looking at here. And if you guys know me at all, you knew darn well I wasn't going to be able just to not put grease in there. That's just something that's essential for me when I'm building trucks that go in water, is to have grease all around the bearings. And you know, I try not to pack my gears so tight with grease, because then that'll add a lot of resistance. But with the 3300 censored brushless motor that I have in here, it'll still be tons of torque even if I packed it full of grease in here, which I'll be adding some to the pinion. And then of course, putting that on. Nice and greasy. You can hear metal on metal. Those are the teeth of the pinion and the spool gear. And then the housing, just fit it in like this, like a glove. And then I'm going to use 4 of these little guys, but I am actually going to use thread lock on here for the blue, because I'm pretty sure we got that right. Getting the 4th one locked down here. I gotta say, one of the things I really do like about this kit already is all the stainless steel screws. So I'm not gonna see a lot of rust right away like I have with other kits. Instead, it'll remain shiny, which is good. And then I poke a bearing down in the end after I added a little bit of grease behind it. Okay, like most of my tutorials, I will usually assemble one side so I know exactly what's going on. And I've got to give a shout out to Vanquish right now, because there's some innovation on this axle that I haven't seen before. Like, check this out. This is a steering throw limiter. It's basically a screw and a washer, if you've never seen one of these axles before. And when the whole C-hub turns, or the steering spindle, you'll notice that it bumps right there. It's a steering limiter. We have this on the Losi 5T, the big 5th scales as well, where it actually stops the throw of the steering. Isn't that something? Also, the way these screws, now normally when we have screws like this in the industry over the last decade, we'd see a screw go into a plastic piece or into an aluminum piece that would basically over time strip out, because over time, as this moves back and forth with steering, a lot of these screws will work their way loose even if you do have thread lock in there. Well, not on these ones, I think, and I'll show you exactly why as we build this one. So let's look at this C-hub or spindle or whatever you want to call it. We're going to take off this one screw that's just sitting there. It's a small 6mm, 3x6. Going to take off this outer plate. That's going to reveal a lot of places where you're going to have bearings and the actual drive gear itself. And I digress. Let me get back to basics here, okay? So if we were actually building a portal gear, you're going to want to start with this shaft right here. This shaft is going to take a bearing first, then a drive pin, then the actual drive gear itself, then another bearing. So I'll show you this assembled. Okay, so there it is with a greased bearing on it. Again, I want to make sure to have as much grease on those bearings as possible just to prevent rust, because I know I won't be seeing them again for a while. Then goes in the drive pin, then goes in the drive gear. Some of you guys might want to use gloves. Crazy Joe calls them bitch mittens. There you go. And then the next bearing goes on. That goes into place. Now, do I have that right? This is supposed to be the 6x12 bearing. I believe I do have that correct. We're going to take the plate. We're going to run this straight through so it sits in the plate like so. Ta-da! Anybody who's built this right now has already fast forwarded through this part, but the people that ask me to build these in detail enjoy these parts. I want you to leave a comment right now. If you're still watching in the video and you enjoy me putting these together for you instead of just big updates, let me know. It's always nice to hear from the viewers. Now a little out of order here, but it doesn't matter. I'm just going to marry these two parts. Get them lined up properly, give it a good wipe. That's what she said. And then I'm going to add the inserts right now. Now this is what makes these so incredible. Look at this small insert. This is basically for the screw to be threaded into so it never strips out. And if you do strip it out for whatever reason, you're able to replace it, which I think is fantastic. So one of these are going to be added to the top and to the bottom, as well as brass bushings. I'll show you what I mean. Have a look. Brass on top, then the threaded piece on the bottom right here, and then I'm going to do the exact opposite on the actual housing itself. I'm going to put the threaded piece down here and then the brass bushing up here. So they're basically going to be opposite of each other, allowing the screws to thread into those two pieces of thread. Even at this stage in the game, this is where I figured that I actually used the wrong bearing for the pinion. So if you were building along with me, I'm sorry. Hopefully you noticed the very fat bearing that was sitting in the middle of the table. It's got a very wide race on it. That's the one the pinion shaft was supposed to go through. So I've already swapped it out, which actually freed up the one that I'm supposed to use. But first what I have to do is put a bearing, we've got to put this bearing on to this axle stub. So let's get that on properly. You'll see on the inside that I've already greased the joint, so there's no need to do that. And we'll put the gear on. Now this is going to be the drive gear for the portal axle. This is going to sit above the large gear that we installed earlier, which had the drive pin on it. And we'll just sit that into place like there, and you'll see as I start to twist the bottom shaft, you'll be able to see the top one move around. So it's going to be in a reverse, like when you're normally spinning forward, it's going to be going backwards. That's what you get when you get two stacked gears, one on top of each other. So for me, I'm going to either have to install my motor backwards or reverse the motor. Now you kind of have to be patient at this stage. If you don't know where everything's lined up, you're going to have to gently try to wiggle and push it in. It's just that straightforward, folks. There it is. And I slide that into position. I'm going to use some thread lock here on this screw that screws in, top and on the bottom. Now I'm installing the bump stop for the steering. The 6mm almost feels a little bit too long, but I think that's just because it just wants to snug up. So if you feel it be a little bit tight, force it, but not too hard. Next goes the drive pin, which is pretty easy to thread through, and then the 12mm hex adapter. And then I can lock that into place where I don't ever have to worry about losing my hex adapter because they put that on. Now once I attach the steering horn and put a few of the extra pieces of hardware on there, this is what you are left with, my friends. Check that out. A beautiful, beautiful portal axle, all aluminum, seemingly fairly strong, we'll have to test that out, and well thought out axle design. The back one is not as difficult because you don't have all the steering components involved. It's just two portals and a rear axle. And maybe I shouldn't say rear axle, I should say rear axle set, because it's going to be two of them, of course. But see here, same pinion and spool. I believe it is. Yep. And then 2 axles and then the bearing. So basically go through the exact same thing, but without having to put on the steering assembly. But this time I'll be sure to put the right pinion bearing in where it's supposed to go for the output drive shaft. 6 screws into the spool gear. Then pack the bearings with grease and install. Put on the 2 bearing housings. Screw it onto the pinion. Always test it to make sure it fits and works. Mounting it directly onto the axle housing and screwing it down. Then we're going to take one of these pins and a bearing and slide it over the actual drive shaft. Then we're going to add a drive pin. Then the drive gear. Then another bearing. And then we're going to mount that in to the outer plate, focusing there. We got lots of grease on there so we can push it through. Be confident there is a bearing up top in the plate. Then I installed the 12mm hex adapter. You'll notice this one is black. It is not gray like the front. Bearing goes in the end of the axle housing, ready to receive the axle with the portal gear on it. So axle, I slid the axle into the axle housing, the end cap. Just want to make sure it all lines up. There we go. I'm going to clear this grease out of the holes before I put the screws in there with some thread lock. With the axle in place, the cover on the drive pin goes through. Same as the other one, then goes on the hex adapter. Tighten it up. And then 3 screws around the outside. Well, when all is said and done, my friends, check this out. It is definitely overkill. This is one of my most favorite projects to date. I almost installed the rear pinion carrier upside down. Thankfully, some viewers that had foresight and could see into the future let me know that that was upside down. It was easy to install upside down, but no problem. Easy to flip around and make sure that when the video finishes, everybody has a great chance to get everything put together the way they need to. Guys, what do you think? Is it worth the cost of the Vanquish products and having licensed Currie axles on your vehicle? I definitely think so. For a project like this that's overkill, it definitely fits the bill. Hopefully you guys have left a like click for this project. We'll see you in the next episode of RC Adventures. Now get outside and have fun with RC, or if you're like me, stay inside and build one. Bye.